SG Reads.
Hello fellow travelers, my name's SG and welcome to the channel. Today I want to talk about the series From, but to be more precise, I want to talk about the theory surrounding it. Mainly because Season 3 is almost at an end this week, so I thought it's best now to figure out what's happening in the story overall, can I guess what's going to happen at the end, and to see where the story is going to take from here on out. So for right now, let's just dig into what we do know, what I'm guessing, and hopefully I'm right on a couple things. If you do like my content, please leave a like, comment, subscribe down below. I'd really appreciate it. It helps let me know that you like content like this. So for right now, let's get started, shall we? Now, let's settle with the first, biggest theory that has been pretty much confirmed at this point, reincarnation. Reincarnation seems to be a major theme in the series. Each character seems to represent a character that's been there before. We are just appearing in this latest cycle, if you will. Each character seems to return there at some point, so for right now we have to assume that there does seem to be a recycle kind of period, where the people of From, or Fromville, depending on who you ask, are constantly being reborn, and they're constantly being brought back to From. For what purpose, we don't really know, but as of right now, we do know that there does seem to be some correlation between that, because many of the characters that we see from both past to present do represent characters that we do see now, such as Boyd being a constant character in this, him having a love for ships, and kind of this having this Nordic past of being a ship sailor in the hidden details of it all, does seem to co-align with this, including the fact that the Tabitha seems to have some sort of connection to Victor and his family as well. So there is certain elements that has pretty much confirmed the idea of reincarnation, and if it's true, it does lead to a lot of different answers and a lot of revelations, but at the same time opens up a whole new world of that. But while we're talking about Tabitha, let's make her the next main topic of this whole thing. Now, the main character is definitely Tabitha. She's definitely playing a main role in this whole series, with 1/3 of the series, and especially after Season 2, revolving around her character and how it's been reacting to the events happening in the series. So for the most part, we do have to assume that she is a bigger part of this, and we can pretty much surmise what her role in this is as well. For the most part, we do know that she does seem to be a reincarnation of Victor's mom, but we don't really know how much of that is true and how much of that is just a memory that she's seeing. I will go off on a limb saying that she is Victor, or at least related to Victor's, if that makes sense. I'm going to play devil's advocate here and saying that she is related to Victor at some point. But I want to say that there is a big part of her that might be Victor's sister. We don't really know what happened to Victor's sister. We know that she went with the mom to go find a way to save the girls, but other than that, she's gone. There's no body, there's no nothing of her. Even Victor doesn't really know. After he mentions her for the first time, he says, well, I don't really know what happened to her. Maybe that's just a part he's trying to block out, or maybe that's just something that'll appear in later seasons. But for right now, I'm going to go with that theory that maybe Tabitha is in fact Victor's sister and just lost her memory, or was later on raised by somebody else. Doesn't necessarily have to go back to reincarnation, could just be a case of memory loss or a case of just a mistaken identity. But then again, that's what I said, but this seems more of a devil's advocate storyline, because I would really like to believe that maybe she's just Victor's mom reincarnated, and that this is just her completing another cycle in the whole story. But what we can say for a fact is that I might know what happens to her at the end of this season, or maybe even the end of next season. At the end of episode 1, or at the beginning I should say, we do know that we hear Julie and Ethan talking about stories that they're making up together, and Julie tells Ethan a story where one character loses their life and the other one watches and tells them to tell their friends and their family that they miss them. This is definitely going to be a bit, I believe, that Tabitha is going to be the character that's dying in that story. Mainly because shortly after that, we do hear that Tabitha has parents. And we do know that Jim doesn't really talk about his parents. Have never brought it up. But for some reason, Tabitha brings them up. And it's even a big part at the very beginning of Season 3 where she talked to her mom. So, that does give some leeway in that scenario. When it comes to the whole idea of the fairies along with that idea, that could mean the little kid spirits that have been guiding her or have been leading them in a different direction. So that does tell me though that there is going to be an escape for somebody. just not her. She's going to be the one that has to remain and or dies in From. So for now, that's what we're going to leave it with, and I do think that there is some leeway to believe in that kind of story. Our other main character, that has been our main character since the very beginning of From, is Boyd Stevens. He is the sheriff of the town, and for the most part, he seems to be the one that's trying to bring law into this town, at the dismay of the evil entities of this world. So, for the most part, we can say for a fact that he is our secondary main character, or even just the main character itself. We are going to say that the main character role has been divided amongst the main cast. But Boyd seems to be the main one that we do follow, that has put himself in danger, and has brought danger to Fromville as we know it. But I can tell you that his ending is definitely going to be one of tragedy. Mainly because, again, if we go back to episode 2 of season 1, Kenny is reminiscing his dad. He's thinking about him being sad of his current passing. So when he does that, he talks about this idea of playing chess games and them always ending pretty much the same way. And that being with the dad winning, but in a very specific way. With all the chess pieces suddenly gone, the king is left, and Kenny says, most of the time I just end up running from the opponent or from my dad's pieces. So that does give a weird inch to it all, suggesting that that's going to happen in the series, and whether that means Kenny's going to be that character is pretty much up next of what I'm going to talk about. But he then gives the king chess piece right after that whole conversation to Boyd. Boyd then puts it on his desk, and we do see it a couple times shortly after, suggesting that he's the king character, and is even mentioned shortly after in season 3 when we do get the new arrivals coming in. So when they do come in, they do say that they think he's being a tyrant, he's being a king, if you will. So that relation of, again, being a king does come back into the main story. So again, that's another correlation with Kenny's story along the way. Plus, we do know that the idea that Boyd does not feel that he is very long, mainly due to his Parkinson's, or something that he feels is related to that place, feeling more of the effect of the place itself getting to him mentally. So I don't think that it's going to end with him either dying. I think it's going to end with him being stuck there in From, being the only one standing, fighting against the opponent, if you will, fighting against the monsters or whatever's coming up from the monsters, which we will talk about right now, as a matter of fact. One of the main characters that's definitely going to be coming in at the very end of the series is the Man in Yellow. Now, anybody who's looked up From, whether through theories or trying to figure out what's next in the story, will know that the Man in Yellow has been seen, that he has been around. And we do know that the only time he's going to be seen in the show is in the final episode of season 3. Now, what we don't know is whether he's a protagonist or an antagonist, or he's there to help. But with history, and along with what we know of classic literature, the Man in Yellow is never a good character. In fact, we can go back to The King in Yellow, and a book from 1895 by Robert W. Chambers, who does kind of give this character a bad guy character, if you will. Being known for being one of the main big parts of classic literature, right next to Edgar Allan Poe, if you will, the book The King in Yellow explored a lot of the same things that we see in From, such as madness, decay, and the supernatural. And it explored a mysterious figure that's constantly in the background, aka the King in Yellow. And while I would like to go more in depth with the character, there really is not. It's open interpretation. It's mainly used in Lovecraftian themes and in its own right in different materials, such as True Detective along the way. So, for right now, what we can say is that there definitely does seem to be some correlation between these books and The King in Yellow and The Man in Yellow. So maybe this is something that will happen later on. Maybe this will be our big bad of the series. But for right now, we're trying to figure out who is he? What is his goal? What is the main thing about him? Well, the most common, or at least in my perspective, what's going to happen is that Fatima is giving birth to a baby. A baby that's not normal. A baby that's not human. One that should not exist. One that we can obviously tell is going to be a monster. So for the most part, I would like to think, or at least this is my intelligent guess, is that Fatima is going to give birth to the Man in Yellow. He'll come out a baby, but then he'll grow rapidly. more than we've seen in the past, and that correlates with the boy in white, if you will. The boy in white has aged slowly, but has aged dramatically reasonably. The show in our time has taken years, but the show in their time has only been 3 or 4 months. So, the boy in white seemed to have aged quite a bit. So it's not without reason that the man in yellow might be the baby in adult form, just being born at that very instant. But another one that the man in yellow might be, that many have thought, has either been Boyd, has either been Jim, has been Jade and Randall, and some even consider Henry being the man in yellow. But if it is one of the characters we've known and come to like, I'm going to go on a limb and say that it's actually Kenny, mainly due to the fact that it would make the most sense and break Boyd's heart more. Kenny has acted like a second son to Boyd, has been through everything, has suffered the most this world has given to him, losing both his parents and from, along with having lost the love of his life, along with other things along the way. So it makes sense that he would be slowly losing himself to this place, and ultimately being taken over by the negative entity of this world. So, if I had to say if there was a contender with being the entity or being the man in yellow, it has to be Kenny. Another thing that we note about the man in yellow is that he has a mole on his cheek. And that is another thing Kenny seems to have, and you can notice it, but it's just on the other side. Another very definable feature, so it might be coming in later on. But that's just a notice of mine that we will have to see as it goes on. Another subject that I do want to talk about is the puppet Jasper, whether he could talk or not. I know a lot of fans did find that disgruntling, that it was not the puppet talking to Christopher. But the way Christopher acts, the way he is to the boy in white, makes me think that Jasper talks. He does. I don't think that Victor was wrong. I do think that there is a moment where the puppet did talk to Christopher. And why do I think that? Because the way Christopher reacts, and the way he even says it, "You're lying, they're all lies." Suggesting that something had been talking to him all this time, just like something had been talking to them through the either radio or through their minds. This negative entity, along with the boy in white, well, not the boy in white, but this negative entity, was talking to Christopher through the puppet. And I think Victor heard it, and is just misremembering this moment. I think if Victor goes back and thinks about it, he'll find out that this wasn't just the boy in white talking to Christopher. This was the boy in white fighting with Jasper over Christopher's thoughts. Maybe this was a time where Christopher was just overwhelmed by all that was happening to him. And that's why he was so in tune with the puppet, that it was talking to him, but it was the negative entity that we've been talking to. The idea that there has been something following along the way. There has been a lot to the main story that we don't know. So for right now, I will have to go with the idea that Jasper was in fact talking to Christopher, but the boy in white was the one that was kind of being the defying factor in this, trying to tell him what to do, trying to help people. But Christopher, because he'd been listening to Jasper for so long, didn't know who to believe anymore, didn't know what to think anymore. So, naturally, he lashed out and just didn't do anything. And that's what ultimately caused the lives of everyone there, not really Victor, with telling his mom everything that happened. Now, another part I want to talk about is the tapestry in Ellis and Fatima's room. It does seem to suggest that it was made relatively recently, and depicting Fatima and Ellis being reached by a creature that we can't see. Now, may you believe that? I don't believe that. I don't believe that it was made recently. I believe that it was made sometime in the previous cycle. Somebody had a vision, much like the people have had visions up to this point, up until now. They've had visions about the future. In the future, they depict two people are going to go and be the cause of the break of the cycle. Because if you think about it, the tapestry shows a bunch of the houses from, but their backgrounds are always different colors, almost signifying a different area or a different time. Maybe this suggests a different timeline each time, but it depicts Fatima and Ellis right in the middle of it, kind of breaking that cycle. So this could tell me that the end game, or the end of the cycles themselves, are Fatima and Ellis. What is the main point? Well, that's pretty much what it is now. It is to give birth to this creature, to give something birth or to give it life. Now, what does that mean? We don't know. But that does seem to fit with what we know about the show from. That does seem to be pointing in that direction. Now, with that train of thought in mind, we have to talk about Elgin and the Kimono Lady. What is their endgame? Elgin just thinks if he follows the Kimono Lady's instructions that she'll lead them out. Now, we don't really know what that means. Now, naturally, on the surface, my first theory for that is that she is trying to give birth to the creature, kind of like a handmaiden, if you will. Just trying to assist in Fatima in giving birth to the next creature that will come out and ultimately be the destruction of the entire cycle that this is in. That's what I think is going to be the overall story. But a more outrageous idea for that story would have to be that the Kimono Lady is doing it to get back at the creature. Whatever did this probably did this to the Kimono Lady in the past. Like, this is how it probably happened in the cycle before. Hence where all the girls come from, because what we heard in that story is that the townspeople were forced to give up the girls, and the girls were given up by people they loved, and they were put to sleep by someone they knew as well, or someone they trusted, given the idea of hope. So, maybe at some point the Kimono Lady did have to give up a daughter to this entity, or maybe the town forced her to do it. We don't really know. But either way, they had to sacrifice somebody to this entity so that the cycle could repeat and that they either got out, or we pretty much know through Victor what happens when the cycle ends. It's never good. So for the most part, we can say that there is another factor in all this. That it is going to lead to this big revelation about the Kimono Lady. Whether she is an antagonist or, like I said before, a helpful hand. But it seems that if she is a helpful hand, she's doing it in her own sense of justice, or for her own right. Maybe she's trying to give birth to this thing, that way she can get rid of it and end the cycle that way. Because when we do meet the boy in white the last time, he does say this is how it has to be. It has to be this way now. Suggesting that the easier ways have already passed, now they have to do it the hard way. So we don't really know much more than that, but it does offer a lot in the overall story. Interesting, but like I said, we don't really know more than that. One of the biggest mysteries that we've seen so far is who is Martin? Martin is the one that was locked in the tower when Boyd first meets him in Season 2. We don't really know much of him otherwise than that, but he does seem to know who the town is, who's there, and even who Julie was, which is an odd take on it. But we can say, for the most part, it might be Randall. Mainly because he has a similar look. They're both military, not just by appearance or by physique, but Martin does have a Marine Corps tattoo on him. We don't really know what service Randall was in, but there does definitely seem to be some correlation. We do see little hints that he is military himself. So, for the most part, the reason I ruled Randall out as the man in yellow is because I think he's Martin. Maybe some time skip, maybe he goes back in time, or maybe this is just his reincarnation. Either way, it does seem to point to the fact that Martin was not really his name. In fact, I think it was Randall that was just him older. And in a weird way, that would make sense why he knew Julie and was so close to her, because he knew her from the past. In fact, he liked her at this certain point. So for the most part, we will have to give that idea that maybe Martin and Randall are one and the same. And because he had a disdain for Boyd as well, and does seem to have more of a violent tendencies as we've seen in the tower as well. So we don't really know more than that, but I will have to say that that's more of a mind theory of mine that I've been thinking about it. Now for the main part, what do I think is going to happen at the end of this episode? Well, for the most part, we won't get many answers. We'll get some, enough to keep us satisfied, but we definitely will not get all. And that's because the way they're writing it is not like a series, not like Stranger Things, or not like any shows like that, because those shows go with a season by season basis. They set up what they want to say at the beginning of the season, and then end it with what they want to say at the end of the season. This is going like a story. This is going like a series. This is setting up a story that's going to go straight through, not give any breaks, and not give you time to think. Well, it'll give you time to think, but you'll have to do that on your own. Because the way it's been placed, if we go side by side with the seasons, that's how it is. There is no stopping. There is no breakpoint. If you think about it, go from season 1's finale to season 2's premiere, there is no stop. There's just keep going. And that's kind of what they're doing. There won't be a payoff at the end of every season. There won't be a payoff until the very end of the series itself. I can pretty much tell that's the direction they're going, and it's not wrong, but I can see why it would get people mad. I think it's fine, because either way I'm going to follow the series because I want to know what's going to happen. So for the most part, I will say that we're not going to get a lot of answers, but what I can say is that we will get half the answers, maybe most, but we will get some answers, at the very least. So, at the very end, I do think that this is going to be the start of a new cycle. We are going to clear the board in this one, because that is something that many have thought. Even in the IMDb, they admit that this is the ending of Chapter 1, and we do know that another chapter begins when the cycle ends. So, with that in mind, it seems that what they're hinting at is that this is the end of everyone in Fromville in this time. Meaning that there is going to have to be people that are going to have to rise up. There are going to be some that are going to be left behind. For right now, we can assume that, like I said, Boyd might be the last one standing at the very end. He's going to fight these monsters to the end, and we might not see him die. It'll be hinted, but we might see him in another season. The two I do believe that we will see at the very end survive. It's going to be Jim, and it's going to be Ethan. Because there's so much hinting that they are going to survive this. The fact that they are the replacements for Victor and Henry suggests that they will be the ones to survive, or at least last longer than anybody else. We do know that for a fact because Henry himself was not trapped there. And Victor seemed to survive very well. So, with that in mind, we do know that they managed to escape. And going back to the story we do know in episode 1 that was being told by Julie, is that somebody dies and they tell him, please tell my parents that I love them. And the only one that has actually brought up about having parents, other than Ethan, has been Tabitha. In fact, like I said before, they make it a point to be known that she has parents. So, that does hint that Jim will survive. Ethan will survive. Anybody else? I couldn't tell you. Like I said before, we may have Kenny be the surviving member, along with Acosta. Those two, I think, are the biggest examples of surviving at the very end of the day. But for the most part, there's no real backing for that at all. So with that being said, that seems to be where the storyline will end for the most part. Now, the biggest mystery is that who is the hero? That shouldn't seem like a hard question. You usually know that right off the bat for any series, for any movie, for any thing we have going on. That's usually our main protagonist. But this seems to be denying that fact. This seems to be denying it all. Mainly because we know that the boy in white asked Christopher to do it. He asked Christopher to end the cycle. We don't know how, but we knew that he told him to do it. So that means he was the hero of that cycle. Not Victor's mom. Victor's mom was just going to do it, but she was not meant to do it. And we knew that Tabitha was called there as well, but the boy in white said that it wasn't her time to do it. So that means that there are people who see things. There are people who are being led there. There are people who think that they are the ones to stop this, but there are people that are designated to stop this. There are people who are designated the roles of hero. And in Victor's youth time, that was Christopher. He denied doing it because he didn't know who to trust, whether this evil entity or whether the boy in white. So he just took himself off the board, and we really don't know what his fate was at the end of the day. We might know that at the end of at episode 10 for season 3, but most likely we'll see it in the next season. But the other hero I think we will see in this is probably Victor. He's the one being led by the boy in white. He's the one that has been the survivor. And the fact that he was able to see this whole conversation between the boy in white and Christopher suggests that he was meant to see it. He was brought there, and even he doesn't really know why he went to go to the church that first day, other than to look for his sister. Even he admits that he knew his sister wasn't going to be there because she was afraid of the church. So, that does go back to the idea that Victor is also another hero that could put a stop to this whole cycle. He just got scared because he was a little boy. There was no way he could have done it. Maybe now he'll get a second shot at it. Maybe he will be the one to close off this portal to From. We don't really know what it does, but he probably won't survive this next ending, along with his dad. So we'll have to see where that goes from this point, but I do think that the main one that has to stop this will ultimately be Victor. Or, if not Victor, then it'll have to be Ethan to finish off the cycle after that. Alright, after some brief deliberation, I kind of figured out that Boyd might be the deciding factor in all this. Sometimes I have to look back and see things as they are, and from what I can gather, it definitely feels like Boyd is pointing in the direction of being the main antagonist. Like I said, if we're looking at the identity of the man in yellow being somewhat similar to the creature known as the King in Yellow, then it fits that the reason that they're trying to break Boyd is so that he can represent the man in yellow. That way for the next season, whether he is a good or bad guy will be up in the air. So I believe at the very end of this season that we will see that everyone in Fromville will be gone. Everyone will either leave From or they'll be, slaughtered by the creatures. But from what I can gather, and from what I can guess from the things I've seen and from what we know, Boyd will be the last man standing no matter what. And that I do believe so far. So for the most part, I have to believe that there will be a moment where Boyd is left alone in this void by himself, much like Victor was. But the difference is that Boyd will be the one to change this. He will be the one challenged to either become the man in yellow himself, or whether he wants to represent the boy in white. So for right now, I think that that will be how the season ends, with that hint of something bigger going on, and entering into the next season where we'll see a new set of people, all reincarnated from either this set of cast or from the previous one before them, and they will be the ones that see Boyd around, much like how we see Christopher being hinted at throughout the series. Alright, with all that being said, this is pretty much the theories I have for the remainder of Season 3 and leading into Season 4 of From. Now, there's not much time left. Admittedly, that we won't see all of it, and a lot of it will be left open-ended for either the next season or the season after, or whenever they wish to finish off the series as a whole. But for right now, it's fun to leave with speculation. I don't think the idea of reincarnation is wrong. I think it's very well done, and in the way they're presenting it here, does fit. Mainly because there is no rule of reincarnation. Mainly because everybody has their own rules set for it. Sometimes people live at the same time, sometimes they don't, sometimes they do. We don't really know where it's going to land, and you won't be the same person every time. But what we can tell is that there is definitely going to be a correlation between the characters. There will be a handle off of the main storyline and the main characters. Now, while it may not be perfect fits, they will hand off to the next row. Like I said, maybe Kenny will survive, but Boyd dies. Kenny might be the last survivor of From, and be the next sheriff that brings in the next cycle. Along with Acosta being the next Donna, taking where Donna left off and trying to be a protector. Those two probably leading on into the next season, being the next protectors of the town. We don't really know, but it's something to think about. For right now, this is where we leave it. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have a question or comment, leave it down below. I'd really like to hear your opinions. If you have your own theories of what the main story is, or if you have your own thoughts about it, please, again, leave it down in the comment section. I'd like to hear it. Thanks again for watching. I hope to see you guys again, and see you guys next time. Thanks, and see you later.